Well, the latest winter storm is moving out of the mid-Atlantic, but there's an upper trough that lagged behind, and there's still some snow going on. We're going to talk about that. Joe Rayo is going to take us on a bit of a radar tour, and it looks like it's going to stay rather cold for the rest of the week across much of the country east of the Rockies. And a new storm is going to develop in the Gulf of Mexico in a couple of days, and could bring some snow and ice to parts of the deep south. And will it have impact on the East Coast? Well, I don't think we're going to get the answer to that tonight, but we'll pose a lot of questions about it tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And of course, you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast if you shop on Amazon. Use our referral link that's pinned to the top of the chat board and also on the descriptor to this podcast. It's very easy. Just use the link, use the search tool, buy your stuff, and Amazon sends us a little bit of coin for sending you there. And it doesn't cost you one extra dime. So it's all out of Amazon's pocket. And we appreciate those of you who have used the Amazon referral link to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Okay, so this system pretty much played out according to plan yesterday. I think I was looking at some of the snow amounts. It looks like about half a foot in the Washington D.C. area, a little bit varied. It's about 4 to 6 inches across a lot of Maryland. Some spots obviously got higher. Delaware, northern Delaware got 8 to 10. Less in South Central PA, less in Southeast PA. South Jersey got 6 to 8, and then the amounts just tailed off as you went to the north, which was expected. But we still have some snow going on in parts of the Mid-Atlantic states tonight, so it's not completely done yet.
No, it's not. And yeah, places that are located in southeastern Pennsylvania and also in portions of central and southern New Jersey, parts of Maryland and Delaware, it's still snowing and will continue for a while longer. Little surprise for me. I mean, I'm thinking, for where I am in Putnam County in the southwestern part of Putnam County. I was anticipating, Joe, maybe a sugar coating, maybe even no snow at all. Well, it started snowing here at about 10:30 this morning. It finally let up at about 3:30, and it left. It was here for what, about 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours. It left the grand total of about a half an inch, and
Whopping.
and that was so it wasn't even worth getting a scraper or a shovel out. So we got out a big broom, and I spent the better part of a couple of hours because I have a long driveway, just broomed all of the snow off. There's a sugar coating on my driveway, but again, got rid of the majority of the half inch or so that did fall during the course of the midday and afternoon. Didn't expect, wasn't hoping that we'd see that much. Was hoping more along the lines of, again, a sugar coating, and actually was hoping that we wouldn't get anything, but that's the way it goes.
Yes, it is. This was a really good example of what happens when you have blocking because everything went out underneath.
Right. And now we are waiting for the last of the snows to end to our south. I'll show that on radar when you give me the cue. And
Okay. And well, let me just run through I just want to say a couple of things. You get your radars ready, so this way we'll do a nice smooth switch from me to you. First off, welcome to everybody on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast tonight on this Monday night. Just want to let you know we're going to be off tomorrow night. I will do a weather in 5 video. Probably will go longer than 5 to cover all the important issues for the rest of the week and going into the weekend. So you'll have that. So be sure to look for it. I'll probably do it sometime in the early afternoon. And also, we'll be back on Wednesday. So we're just taking one day off. We've done 8 days in a row, so we're both kind of whacked out here after all of this. And I just want to also say that with respect to the system for the weekend, trying to get people to stop jumping from run to run because all that does is give you consternation. But we said last night, and I said the night before last, and I said this last night. We're probably not going to know until Wednesday how this is going to play out. So models can just pretty much do whatever they want on the surface. It doesn't matter. It's really about the blocking to the east of the Atlantic and what that does. And that remains the case tonight with all everything that the models did today, particularly the GFS. I wouldn't put really any stock into any particular specific until we get to about Wednesday. Then we'll be able to settle all of this out. So we'll leave it at that. Mr. Rayo has got his first radar up on the screen, so have at it.
Okay, well, we do have the radar. Normally I start with New York, but tonight we're starting with Dover Air Force Base down in Delaware. And you can see that in the areas of green, that's probably where it's snowing at a pretty good clip, at least a nice, steady, light snow. And it's still snowing. I'm not exactly sure how much snow Washington, D.C. picked up today, but it was probably on the neighborhood of about 6 to 8 or 7 to 9 inches. The activity, as you can see, streaking along from west to east across Maryland into Delaware, also affecting southeastern sections of Pennsylvania and central and southern New Jersey, where they also picked up a sizable amount of snow. Now let's take a look at another perspective. Let's go up to Philadelphia, Wrightstown, New Jersey, and you can see that broad area of snow again is beginning to shift now more to the south. The loop starts off, as you can see, covering a good part of east and southeastern Pennsylvania, and also going all the way up to almost to the top of New Jersey. But then over time, as we run the loop, and it's a 3-hour loop, you can see how things are progressing down to the south. So now, on the final few frames of the loop, just about all of northern Jersey is out of it now in terms of snow, and the same holds true for New York City and the lower Hudson Valley. But again, in southeastern Pennsylvania, including Philadelphia, there's still some light snow that's falling, and also the same holds true for parts of southern New Jersey as well, and also for Delaware too. Let's check out, speaking of Washington, D.C., let's go to Washington and Sterling, Virginia. And again, where you see the greens, that's probably where it's snowing at a steady clip, steady light snow, and even lighter in the blue. But you can see much of Maryland is still underneath that snow, as well as eastern sections of West Virginia and northern sections of Virginia. And again, that is all pushing generally to the south and to the east. So I would say let's give it another 2 or 3 hours, and all of what you see here on the radar will probably be moving offshore, and this particular snow storm, will be over. So let's see if there's anywhere else I can go to.
I think you pretty well covered it. I was looking at the observations in Maryland and Virginia, and just to confirm what you said, and most on the light, it's a light, steady snow. There are a few places where the visibilities are down to under a mile. I didn't see any moderates, but you know what? Another coating to an inch or maybe two is probably possible in some of those places as this upper trough goes by.
Right, and you can see on this loop from Wakefield, Norfolk, Virginia, that one band of snow at the beginning of the loop is moving offshore, but that's not the end, because on the backside we have that new area of snow that is working its way through northern Virginia and heading for the Delmarva area. And so that'll be the final shot of snow. And again, a couple of 3 hours, it'll all be gone, it'll be offshore, and we'll go into a clearing trend. And the winds are going to start picking up. Those winds are going to be blowing quite hard for much of the rest of this week. We don't seem to get any kind of relief from the winds. The winds will make it feel much colder. Here in the immediate New York metropolitan area, I have temperatures, at least through Thursday, Joe, peaking near 30, but with the way the winds will be blowing, it'll probably feel like it's only near or above 20. So if you're going to be out for the rest of this week, I would suggest you bundle up.
All right, very good. And we still have, by the way, winter storm warnings that are up in areas to the south. I'm going to just put that map up on the screen. And just want to let, again, hello to everybody on the chat board. Hello to Miss Fowlerite in Kansas City, where they're actually doing a pretty good job of the cleanup, I understand. Um, Welcome to those of you who are watching, and not on the chat board, but in the background on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Sunday through Thursday is our regular schedule, 7:35 p.m. We go on Friday and Saturday if there's a storm around. So if we are going to get a storm this weekend, we're going to probably be on Friday and Saturday, which is why we're going to be taking off to tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And as I said, we still have winter storm warnings up in West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, a few counties in Western Virginia, advisories in the southern part of the state, and in the rest of southwestern Virginia. You go to central and eastern Virginia, it's all winter storm warnings. Still the same for Maryland and Delaware and into southern New Jersey with advisories just to the north. Just waiting for this the last of this upper trough to just move on through. Cold air on the backside of this has come all the way down. We've had falling temperatures here all day. I woke up this morning, it was 44. By the time we got to 11 o'clock, it was 35. And right now it's 25 here in North Georgia at 2,200 feet. And I had some snow flurries a little while ago that whitened up the ground a little bit. The little stuff is coming off the mountains. We see wind chill advisories, by the way, along the Gulf Coast. That's that light blue, along with the freeze warnings. It's hard to believe that they're still dealing with freeze warnings, but in North Florida and Southeast Georgia, that may very well be the case. And when we also have them up for parts of South Texas. Not much going on in the West. There's some wind in Southern California, but nothing in the way of storminess and precipitation as far as watches and warnings are concerned. And as we look at the satellite loop, you can see our storm is now offshore and it's going to re-strengthen the block that's in Atlantic Canada, which is why, as Joe mentioned, we're going to get the big wind for the next several days. And you still have the upper trough. That's why you got all these clouds that are still hanging back to the west that have to play through. So the snow that's falling in Virginia and in Maryland and in parts of Delaware and even touching parts of southern New Jersey should be moving out in the next several hours. Out in the west, you've got some clouds moving into the southwest, and we've got moisture beginning to come out of the Pacific, crossing Mexico and into the western Gulf of Mexico. And this is where our next storm system is going to be developing. And the least we can say is across the Northeast anyway, the Mid-Atlantic, and back through the Great Lakes, it's just going to be, and particularly in those areas that got a lot of snow from Kansas eastward to Virginia, it's going to be darn cold for the next 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, no question about that. No question. And again, it's cold, but it feels all the colder because of those gusty winds. We're looking at tomorrow, Joe, the possibility of winds gusting upwards to 30 or even 40 miles an hour at times, and it just doesn't want to quit. I mean, we had an elf. We still have a lot of our Christmas decorations up, and over the weekend we have an elf that's on the front lawn,
I'm sorry, I
and
have to laugh.
and the elf got flattened by the winds over the weekend. In fact, he got so flat that the top of his head came off. And Renata just we brought the whole thing in and said, the hell with it. We're not gonna put him outside anymore. This is the first of eventually all of the decorations that are going to be coming back inside. When they come back inside, I haven't the foggiest idea. I am not going to be going out with temperatures only near 30 and roaring winds of 15 to 30 miles an hour. Wait a little while. Hopefully it'll warm up mid or late month. But
Right. Well, Joe, at that point, you might as well just tell everybody that you're being very clever by decorating for next Christmas early.
I said to Renata, I said we ought to just keep everything up
Well,
for.
you know that's not happening.
Yeah, I know that. I know.
The chat
But heck,
board,
they started. Some radio stations started playing Christmas music the day after Halloween. So one of these fine days in the next few years, you'll start having Christmas beginning in July, for all I know.
right. The chat board is demanding that you ring the bell because we're over 100 likes already.
Oh my goodness. Well, here you go. Ring, 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 ring.
There you go.
I'm saving the horn for 200.
Yes. So here's the wider view of the radar, and I'll give it a quick refresh here. And you see the area here in Virginia, Maryland, southern New Jersey, actually even up to about Monmouth County. There's still some light snow in southern Pennsylvania, and of course, nothing of what fell overnight and today is going to melt because of the fact that we're going to be seeing temperatures very cold, barely back to freezing during the day. Excuse me, and down in the teens and 20s at night. The rest of the radars across the much of the United States are actually pretty quiet. A couple little patches of snow in South Dakota, one in central Wyoming, another area up in northern Nevada, and that is just about it as far as precipitation is concerned. We do not have any severe weather risks going forward, so that's good. And WPC, now this takes us through next Tuesday. Now, uh, remember, by the way, Joe, I know the map says 2209, but the first versions of this map go up at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So they really probably don't see much of the new guidance when they do this. They probably see some of it. I don't think they see the euro when they do this. So they're not showing much in the way of precip over the next 7 days in the Northeast. Some places nothing at all. Otherwise, a tenth to a quarter of an inch from Long Island and New Jersey, and then you start to see the half inch in Southeast Virginia down into North Carolina, a quarter to a half inch across um, southern Tennessee, northern Alabama, northern Mississippi, North Georgia, and western South Carolina. That's going to be important. And heavier precip down along the Gulf Coast, where we're looking at 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half, and even heavier precip just offshore. Not much in the Rockies, quarter to a half to 3/4 when you go up north. And really not much going on in the Pacific Northwest, nothing in California. It's been a really dry winter there so far. So I'm going to run through a couple of models here. Well, I want to talk about what's going to be going on first in the Deep South as we go through the next several days with this developing low in the Gulf of Mexico that starts to pop up on Thursday. And you see snow in northeast Texas. Dallas might get a few inches out of this. You've got a cold high in West Virginia, and then you got all those isobars. Excuse me, very dry in my house, and I had the fireplace on, so I'm having some nose issues. But you notice a ton of isobars tight together along the northeast and mid-Atlantic coast, going east out into the ocean. That's that blocking low, and of course the new storm is part of this, and it's just going to pretty much stay there until we get to maybe even Friday in New England. It's still going to be breezy in the Northeast. The gradient is not going to really let go until sometime late Friday or Friday night. Now, the last two runs of the GFS, of course, I know everybody's already seen the 12Z run, which I just went back to, which has this Gulf low coming out and then off the North Carolina coast to Chesapeake Bay. It explodes into a major storm. And if you've seen the snow maps, it produces another round of 25 to 35 inches. And as I said yesterday, if we add, and I'm serious about this, I mean, if we add all those maps that we've seen this far this winter on various model runs that have produced 25 and 35 inches, we should have had 150 inches of snow on the ground because now we get to add this one. And then it rides along to the northeast. In the south, that high that is in West Virginia or Western Pennsylvania is going to wedge cold air down into Georgia, northern Alabama, northern Mississippi. So a lot's going to really depend on this Gulf low. How developed does it get? And there's going to be a fairly decent flow of moisture that's going to come into this. And certainly, if you look at the GFS, it brings snow to northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, into North Georgia, and then a changeover to freezing rain come Friday afternoon and Friday night, which eventually spreads up through South and North Carolina and points north. Of course, then you get this developing low into the cold air and it explodes into a snowstorm. Um, we're at Monday here, so we still got about another 3 or 4 days. I would say that certainly the risk, and you got to remember that the threshold for winter storm warnings in northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, and North Georgia is like 1 to 3 inches, and yeah, and that is that is a low amount. So compared to what we know as the thresholds are much higher in the Northeast and in the northern Mid-Atlantic states. So just bear that in mind. And here, what would be considered more of a nuisance in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states is a big problem in the Deep South because it just doesn't happen that often. And a lot of these places don't have equipment to clear roadways and so on. So this could be an important event for the Deep South, depending on how developed this weather system is. By the way, Joe, DT is on the chat board. Uh, Dave, I have already preset the ensembles, so they're all ready to go. So I'm going to show them. So you're going to
Going to
have
see.
just
So we're going to see Ann Shambles now,
we're going to
or
see Ann Shambles. I even have the European 144-hour Ann Shambles. But what I want to do here, Joe, is just go back to the upper air and talk about how this is playing out, what we need to look for, what needs to be watched, and it's all about the block that is sitting out in the North Atlantic, and here it is, this big blocking low. I have it rolled out to Friday, and if I just move it back, you'll notice I don't have to really change that circle. I'm back to Sunday night. I mean, it's virtually in the same place, and the new system just basically re-energizes it, so it's just sitting there. Now, here's the thing: you have a trough that is dropping down right now. Actually, the clouds and precipitation, what little there is of it that we saw back in the west, that is an upper trough that is dropping down into Baja and Mexico, and then gets ejected eastward. There's northern energy that's going to get involved in all of this. And while that's happening, the block is pulling out, okay? Or not completely, but it's moving further east. And we talked about this yesterday. It didn't do that with this particular storm we just had, which was why it just basically went straight east in a straight line from Kansas to Virginia, and didn't deviate, didn't shift further north. And if you think back to last week, we had a couple of the models taking the lows up to Cleveland. And when I originally looked at it, I'm like, this looks like a front end thump, but how could it go there if we've got a block developing? And when we had Dave on, he correctly pointed out that the block was going to force everything to the south, which is exactly what it did. And then we have a situation of trying to figure out, is the block going to relax enough? And on the GFS, it certainly does. In fact, on the 18Z run, it relaxed so much on the operational run that it looks more like a coast hugger than anything else, which would bring more rain along the coast to take all the heavy snow inland. But we're not here today to make the Saturday forecast. We're here today to analyze what's going on and what could happen. So the bottom line with the GFS is that the southern shortwave gets ejected out, okay, and gets into the developing trough uh, from um, uh, from the western Great Lakes southward into the Gulf states, and then it lifts up the eastern seaboard as a vigorous upper low that develops with it, and that's why you see the GFS going absolutely nuts with the coastal low. However, this is not the only idea. There are a couple of other ways that this could work out, and I want to switch to I'm going to switch to the icon model because
before you do that, Before
Yes.
you do that, let me just read what Bill Goodman, our friend from the National Weather Service, one of the forecasters at the New York City National Weather Service, and this is what he posted on Facebook a few hours ago. And he wrote, 2 feet of wishful thinking from the GFS model for both Philadelphia and New York City for the upcoming weekend in today's forecast cycle. Model is way too fast, ejecting energy out of the southern branch of the jet stream, and that allows it to merge or phase, as we like to say in the weather business, the weather speak, with another piece of energy diving out of Canada in the polar jet stream to blow up a big storm right off the coast, which I'm sure all of you have seen. The ECMWF, the European model, is slower with that southern energy, and so everything remains out of phase.
Hold
The
on.
mer-
Here's the European. Go ahead. You can keep going, but I just want to show everybody what he means by that. You can see
okay,
this. You can see the southern energy. Well, this is the first system that goes out. Here's the trough that drops down into the southwest, and it just lags behind. It just kind of gets stretched out like a piece of taffy in this massive, positively tilted trough. I mean, it's totally different. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
he says the European model is slower with that southern energy, so everything remains out of phase. The merger does not happen, and we get a flatter storm system that impacts the southern mid Atlantic with less snow. That idea appears more correct to me. This is Bill Goodman now talking, that the idea of the European is more correct than the bombs away cycle of the GFS. He said, now, if the European were to get more constantly on board with the faster southern stream idea than it had in previous cycles, I could be more optimistic for a big I 95 snowstorm this weekend, but it's got to show me the money. And
And
that's,
I think I think it's important to be skeptical here. I'm doing just that. It now, Cecilia Hernandez. You want to know what is ejecting energy is? If you look at the shortwave? Okay, so this is the southern shortwave. All right, whereas this is the block that's up here. But this is the southern shortwave. What he's saying is that instead of running to the east and getting involved with the flow to the north, it just kind of it just sits there and just gets stretched out. That's on the European. On the GFS, that same upper trough gets ejected out to the east. You can see how it just moves along with everything else. Okay, so that's what he means by eject the energy being ejected out to the east. So I hope that clears it up for you. But again, if we have something like the European has, then you're going to wind up, and I'll go to the 12Z run. And by the way, the 18Z run was exactly the same as the 12Z on the
I
European,
noticed that.
pretty much. It's almost as if somebody just decided to, just take the old maps and run them through. But it takes a surface low in the Gulf of Mexico, and then it just basically takes it out east northeast, well underneath us. It never really gets involved with the northern energy that comes down, which is why you see that blotchy snow in New York and Pennsylvania down into Virginia. And it doesn't do very much. It just goes out and you can kiss it goodbye. The Canadian and the Icon, interestingly enough, um, well, they do two couple of things. For the folks that are watching in the southern states, in northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, and in Georgia, on the latest on the 12Z run. Let me go back to that. It You can see there's sort of this broken area of moisture. It's kind of like the European on the 12Z run, and then on the 18Z run, which only goes out to 120 hours, but it's not it's now a little it's different than the European. It's not quite like the GFS, but it's got more of the GFS idea here with the low and the upper air energy getting ejected out. It's still like a positively tilted northeast southwest trough until it gets to near the coast, but nonetheless, it has gone a little bit more toward the European and the Canadian. When you look at the Canadian model, it kind of had an idea that I thought was pretty interesting, which is to just basically take a low off North Carolina as a deepening storm and skimming the coast with some accumulating snows and then out. So all of this really, at the end of the day, hinges on that block. If it relaxes enough, you could wind up with something like the GFS. If it relaxes too much, okay, if it relaxes too much, in other words, if it pulls out so far to the east, it could force this low to be more of a coast hugger, which is kind of what the 18Z run did. Still brought heavy snows just literally just inland of the coast, of the immediate coast, and then on up and out it goes. Or if it relaxes somewhere in between, then you could get something like this. This is the GFS from earlier today, which was, a burial, especially if that northern energy gets involved. Now, Don Thompson, name from the past. Dave Tolerus, I've got the ensembles. I'm using the pivotal ensembles. This is the GFS 18Z ensembles, and you'll notice that for on the plots of the surface map, it's got the low it's got the low to the southeast and offshore. All the members, a lot of the members of the ensemble, the different ensemble members are Joe. All those plots are in the box, and a few, more than a few of these are showing lows under 970 millibars. So the ensemble is very interesting. The European 18Z ensembles show. Hold on, I got to get out to 144. No, 120. All right, so the European ensembles. Let's go to 126. The European ensembles are kind of following along with the idea that you're going to have something weaker getting ejected out of the southern stream, but it does have a plot of surface lows, to the southeast, and then they move on out to the east northeast, and goodbye. So I don't think anything that we've looked at today changes my mind. I mean, in the idea of wanting to come out, saying something today, you cannot say anything definitive today about what may or may not happen come the end of the week. And here's what, by the way, here's what the 500, the upper air looks like. So we're still on the European, and you can see that the trough right in here is Lake Superior down into Mexico. That's a positively tilted trough, okay? And there's everything just kind of gets swept from west to east in a situation like this. If we switch to the GFS, we'll take a look at that. You'll notice it's a bit of a different look to it, to the trough. You can right in here. It's more north-south oriented. So instead of going, having a trough that looks like this, you've got a trough that looks like this. All right. This is much more supportive of something that's going to try and come up the eastern seaboard and become strong as it does so. But no guarantees here from the management folks. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss to try to figure out how this is going to play out, mainly because we're really depending on that block, Joe. It's got to weaken enough to allow for some room, and that was a problem in the last storm. And I suspect, if I had to really take a side on this, I would say that I would bet on the idea that the block is going to be stronger and last a little longer, and everything is going to wind up being flatter and further south. Now, I may wind up eating my words on Wednesday when we take a look at this, but that's kind of where my head is at right now.
This pattern, as I mentioned on other occasions, this pattern looks very similar to me to the winter of 72, 73, where we had one storm after another pass off to our south. And places like Virginia, West Virginia, even Maryland and southern New Jersey, they got the snow, but New York City kept missing out. And there was even, I think, once or maybe a couple of times that winter where places like in North Carolina, got bombed with like 10 and 15 and even 20 inches of snow. And it was so frustrating that year. Central Park ended up with a grand total of about 2.5 inches of snow. And it wasn't that, it was too warm, and it wasn't that we weren't getting any, storms or cyclones. We were getting all of that. But that year, as we're seeing right now, the block was just simply too strong to allow these storms to come far enough north to affect the immediate New York City metropolitan area. That was, again, 1972, 73.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really kind of where it's at. I know Dave is putting up some of his opinions on the chat board, and we welcome those opinions. I think he knows his stuff. Um, so yeah, I would agree with what you. The ensemble track puts some snow into D.C., Philly, New York City, very little for New England, and into D.C. And certainly not a monster snowstorm like the operational is showing, which is just kind of silly. You really would have to have all the dynamics come into line, you know, with the GFS operational uh, for the GFS operational run to have some semblance of the reality. Maybe the Canadian surface, I thought was probably the sort of a compromise of all three, where you wind up with something that is substantial but not crazy, and it kind of skims the coast all the way up into southern New England and New York City, Long Island, southern New England, um, mostly central South Jersey and Point South gets something out of it, and then it goes out. But I'm going to let the models continue to settle things out tomorrow and on Wednesday. Maybe we'll get a bit of a surprise out of this, of some kind. I don't know, but I just kind of wish, Joe. The models do what they do. I really wish these 25 to 35 snowfall map predictions that come up and then get plastered all over the place really just do such a disservice
Somewhere
to
out
the
there, there's a 14 or 15-year-old wannabe who
rich
wants to be,
wannabe. He's a
which,
rich wannabe because you know, he's getting clicks and he's getting paid for it.
well, yeah, all I was going to say was that there's somebody out there, 14, 15, 16, who sees these things and then immediately says, we're going to get a monster snowstorm on Saturday. And some areas may get up to 2 feet. And you're right. That's how you talk about your clickbait. That's clickbait, especially those
Yeah.
people who don't know any better.
Well, it's certainly interesting. And it's certainly not like last winter where we had to wait for that 1 week in February where something happened. But uh, it's a challenge. It's always a challenge in figuring these things out. I get such a kick out of people who get angry because they ask 7 days in advance and you can't give them a straight answer, and somehow they think that you're entitled to get a straight answer 7 days ahead of time for something specific. I just want to briefly go back to uh, this system for the South. I think that certainly places like northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, northern Georgia see at least a few inches of snow out of this before some of these areas, particularly from Georgia northeastward into the Carolinas, go over to freezing rain. We got this wedge thing that goes on here, where the high to the north wedges down into the mountains, and all the cold air gets trapped. And a lot of these places are 1,500, 2,000 feet up. It stays colder longer up here. Trust me. So I'm a little concerned with what could turn out to be a snow and ice situation, a snow and ice storm for me. So we'll see how that goes. Dave says,
The operational, which has been showing now more often than not. Somebody on the chat board said maybe this is like the 2016 big snowstorm with the NAM. Remember, the NAM kept saying New York was going to get hit with like 20 plus inches of snow over and over again. Everybody was saying, that's not going to be right. That's not going to be right. The global models are much better. They have a much better handle on it. And then literally at the last minute, the global model said, hey, the NAM's idea is pretty good. We're going to go with it. And so now I think somebody on the chat board is saying, well, maybe the GFS will keep saying that we're going to get hit with a 20 to 30-inch snowstorm, and the other models will say no, 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 and then at the last minute, the other models will say, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's join the GFS." I don't think that's going to happen, though.
No.
I really,
And this, by the way, I mean, not to toot our own horn, but if we don't do it, nobody else will. But if you're watching, and if you're new to this channel, or if you're a forecast shopper, because everybody knows how much I love people who forecast shop. At this stage, what we're doing is what you should be, what other reputable people would be doing, is basically laying out what's going on, and trying to figure out how this is all going to play. And it's perfectly reasonable on a Monday for something you're talking about for a Friday and Saturday to say, look, I can't give you any specific answers now. You just can't. And especially down here in the South, I mean, you really have to wait until the day uh, before you make proclamations about snow and ice, because it's such a tough, it just doesn't happen that often. If you see it once or twice a winter, it's a lot. And sometimes you can go several years and not see any risk. We didn't see anything of consequence here last year, even here in the mountains. And our average snowfall here is probably around 12 to 15 inches, which is almost the same average snowfall as southern New Jersey. So you know when the storms do come, those are all learning experiences for the forecasters themselves, and that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to be sort of laying out the scenario, and just sort of playing around with the models and trying to figure out which one looks like it has the better idea. Uh, the folks that are putting up maps with numbers are that doesn't do doesn't help anybody. All that does is cause problems. It causes somebody to cancel a doctor's appointment that they waited months for. It causes somebody to cancel a vacation that they paid for and may not get their money back. So you have to do the responsible thing, and many people do. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't. So, I'm glad you're all here, because those of you who are here kind of understand where we like to go with this sort of stuff.
I have said many times in the past, and I'll say it here again, the thing that drives me crazy when a potential big storm is coming is when you see a forecaster on one of the local channels and he'll say, now this is what the NAM is showing. But wait a minute, take a look at what the GFS is saying. But however, the European is showing a completely different thing. And then he starts showing the numbers, NAM 4 inches, GFS 8 inches, European 3 inches. And I said this at the ninth Tri-State Weather Conference back in September in front of many people, and other people behind me who some of them were and are television meteorologists. I said, I absolutely hate that, because what you're doing is you're just showing the model guidance. People forget that word. It's guidance.
Right.
What you're supposed to be using, those guidance models, those are your tools to take everything and gently merge it into some kind of a consensus, so that when you are finished, you'll come out with a forecast that shows who's going to get what, where the storm is going to go, instead of showing, well, this one says this and that one says that, or whatever. And the thing I'll never forget is that as I'm doing all of this on the stage, I caught sight of Dr. Jason Toole, who is the director of the Eastern region of the National Weather Service. And Joe, as I was saying this, here's Jason Toole. He's shaking his head like this. He's saying, absolutely, absolutely, you're right. So, if you ever watch your local TV forecaster and he's showing you, or she is showing you, all of the differences between the models as to what they're saying, that's only going to confuse the viewer even more. What you got to do is you got to take all of that and, again, take it into a consensus and then present your forecast, not the forecast of each separate model. So I know I'm preaching to the choir,
Right.
but what the heck?
Well, I don't mind so much I don't mind if they use the models if they then make the decision on the say on the air. You know, yes, there's our 200th one.
Yes.
200th likes. Thank you. Uh, I don't particularly mind so much that they'll use the models on the air. Uh, if if they ultimately say, I think that this model has the track, and that's what I'm basing my forecast on. Okay. If they do that, I'm sort of okay with it. But to simply say, we've got three models and three different tracks. Well, guess what? Every storm you have three models and three different tracks. Actually, now you've got more than three models. You could have 12, depending on, if you're in the short range.
You know,
So
I'm
to me, it's a
envisioning.
waste of time. You might as well, your job is to make a forecast. Your job is to make a decision and make a forecast. And I think that's what most people expect. So, they want someone to say something definitive. And I've always tried to do that when I get to a point where I'm confident enough to know what I think is going to happen. So, if you give folks something definitive, they can process that. You give people 12 choices, you cannot you can't process that. It's like a guy at Home Depot in the chainsaw department. If he's got 12 chainsaws to choose from, he's going to he's going to take forever to decide, oh, which one can I, should I buy? Or just to be fair, if you're a woman buying shoes, okay, same concept. We want definitiveness is what we want.
A lot of the
That's
people who are on the chat board probably are not old enough to remember our mutual friend Alan Casper when he was on CBS Channel 2 in the 70s. But I'm just visualizing Alan using what we have today, the spate of different computer models, one saying something completely different from another, whatever. And you're right. Alan would probably say of the GFS tonight, well, I took a look at the GFS model that's predicting 30 inches of snow for this coming Saturday, and that model, my friends, is a lot of baloney. And Alan would say that. Alan
Oh
would do
yeah. Or he
something.
would say you could take this model and throw it in the garbage.
Exactly.
Throw it out the
Exactly.
window. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. That's
And
you know.
that's the way you should. That's the
Or
way.
on the other hand, just to put it on the other side of the equation, where the model would be showing nothing, and you know something was going to happen, so you would say you could take that model and throw it out the window because it's not working. So you
Right.
just hey, we all try our best. At the end of the day, these uh, these storms are all very challenging. Um, you know,
It's good with the GFS. Here's my prediction. Is right now the GFS is like a balloon, and that you're blowing the balloon up, but each time it shows you that 20 to 30 inch, and it's done that now on two consecutive runs, the 12Z and the 18Z, and it showed it about a couple of days ago. It's like a balloon, and eventually, when we get to it in a certain time frame within 3 days of the actual event, somebody's going to take a needle and stick it in that balloon, and boom, and that's going to be it. And suddenly the major storm, the big storm, is going to be no more. We may very well get some snow this weekend, but certainly does not look like, in my opinion, we're going to be seeing anything like what the GFS has been suggesting and what some are jumping up and down and getting all excited about. But we'll see. We'll see how it all pans. Hey,
right.
look,
And as
you know,
Dave just
with
repeated,
time, maybe that flatter flow that the European is showing will be the correct one, and everything will go around
or
underneath it.
or you could split the difference, and it could be just something in between where it's a moderate storm with a moderate snowfall.
Right, with the
It doesn't
Canadian,
have to. It doesn't
Canadian
have
and
to
the
be
icon,
Armageddon or complete peace. It can be something in the middle.
the Canadian and the icon are pretty much down the middle between the GFS and the European. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That could happen too.
All right. Meewit wants to know, why doesn't my fire move? Are you really living in Florida? First of all, my fire doesn't move because I've trained the flames to stand perfectly still while while the show, while the Joe and Joe weather show is going on. No, that is my. I live in a cabin in the woods, okay, in the mountains, in North Georgia, and that is my fireplace. I've got two rocking chairs. One of those rocking chairs was my grandmother's, by the way, and that's where I live. I mean, I'm a mountain guy. I got a river that runs through the edge of my property. There's fishing, there's hunting here. It's great. I love it. I'm not a hunter, I'm a fisherman, but um, and it's wonderful. So I put the backdrop of there, and I've got my cameras now outside because a number of you have said I should get outside cameras. Well, guess what? I have outside cameras now, including one that's portable. So when it does snow, and when it does snow here and it accumulates, you can see how scenic it is. And no, Reuben Fairchild, I am not shaving my goatee. It is getting thicker and thicker and longer, and I love it. It's staying. So there you go.
Before you know it,
Uh,
before you know it, Joe will look like David Letterman.
oh, he really grew it all the way down. I'm not going to do that, but
He was on a talk
I'm
show.
liking this. You
He
know,
was on a talk show, and somebody asked him. He said, "So what does your wife and your son think about this?" And he said, "My wife and my son hate it, and the more they hate it, the more I am determined to continue to grow it." So
yeah. Well, I get it. I totally understand. Okay, I think we could pretty well wrap this up tonight. Um, so everybody remember, we will be back on Wednesday. So the plumes, Brandon, are not going to help us tonight because they only go out 90 hours. We need to go out like 120 to 144 hours. So by the time we get to Wednesday, we'll be, in just getting into that zone. So I got a feeling that by Wednesday we should have a fairly good idea of what we're going to be dealing with, and I certainly will have a very good idea of what I'm going to be dealing with here in the deep south. So um, we'll see you Wednesday night at 7:35 p.m. Okay?
and, and thank you for the 222, according to my counter, 222 likes tonight. Thank you.
Yes. All right, everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Don't forget, I'm also going to I'll put up a video during the day tomorrow so you can at least update you on what's going on, and then we'll see you back live on Wednesday. Night, everyone.
Good night.